This is a story about Peter Pan, the boy who never grew up. There was once a house in London where Mr. and Mrs. Darling and their 3 children, Wendy, John and Michael, lived. Watching over the children was Nana, the nursemaid, who also happened to be a dog. It was to this home that Peter Pan came one magical night. He chose this house for a very special reason. There were people there who believed in him, but not Mr. Darling. He only thought about business, the importance of being on time and dressing properly. But Mrs. Darling was still young enough to believe in Peter Pan and that he was the spirit of youth. Then there were John and Michael. They knew how to fight off pirates, whoop like Indians, and march like soldiers. To them, Peter Pan was certainly real, and they made him the hero of all their games. This is John, and this is Michael. But the real expert on Peter Pan was Wendy. This is Wendy here. She knew everything there was to know about him. On this particular night, after Michael and John had drawn a pirate map on their father's shirt, it is there, Mr. Darling angrily declared, "Children need to grow up." Then turning to Wendy, he added, "This is your last night in the nursery, young lady." Mrs. Darling tucked her 3 children into bed and kissed them good night. Then she and Mr. Darling left to the party, leaving Wendy, John and Michael fast asleep. And there's Nana, who's going to look after them. She's the dog, and she's looking after them while they're asleep. As soon as the children were asleep, Peter Pan and his fairy friend Tinker Bell slipped through the window. The Darlings' nursery was a familiar place. Peter liked to sit in the shadows and listen to Wendy's stories about Neverland. But on his last visit, Peter had been separated from his shadow. Tonight he had come to get it back. There's his shadow there. "Well done, Tinky, you found it," Peter whispered when Tinker Bell discovered his shadow. But the shadow was in no hurry to be caught. It flitted and skirted around the room. Peter charged after it, making such a racket that Wendy woke up. He was chasing his shadow around. "Peter Pan, I knew you would come," Wendy cried. "I saved your shadow for you. Let me sew it back on." There she is, sewing it back on, attaching it onto his foot. "Oh, Peter, I'm so glad you came back tonight, because it's my last night in the nursery," she added sadly. "But that means no more stories," cried Peter. "I won't have it. Come on, we're going to Neverland. You'll never grow up there." "John, Michael, wake up. Peter's taking us to Neverland," cried Wendy. "But Peter, how do we get there?" "Fly, of course. It's easy. All you have to do is think a wonderful thought and," said Peter, shaking Tinker Bell, "add a little bit of pixie dust." Now there's Tinker Bell in Peter's hand. You can't really see her. She's very, very tiny, see? And she's sprinkling pixie dust onto the children. "We can fly," announced Wendy, John and Michael, as they followed Peter and Tink out of the nursery window. They soared over the rooftops of London. Peter laughed with glee as he pointed up into the sky. "There it is, Wendy, Neverland. Second star to the right and straight on till morning. And there they are flying. Michael, John and Wendy flying round Big Ben and up to the stars. And there's Tinker Bell and Peter Pan." From high up in the sky, they finally spotted the land of their dreams. "Look, John," cried Wendy. "Mermaid Lagoon." "And the Indian camp," yelled John. "And there's a pirate ship and its crew," added Michael, "just as you told us, Wendy." "Mermaid Lagoon, and there's the pirate ship there, and the Indian camp is up here." Oops, I did it. There it is, with its tents and smoke coming up. And look, Michael's got his teddy bear. The captain of the pirate ship was Hook. He hated Peter Pan. "Blast that Peter Pan," Hook said to his first mate, Mr. Smee. This is Mr. Smee. If I could only find his hideout, I'd trap him. Captain Hook got his name because he had a hook where his hand should have been. There he is. And there's his hook where his hand should have been. And who was to blame for that? Why, Peter Pan, of course. Hook had another enemy, the crocodile. He's been following me around for years, licking his chops at Hook, and he'd have had you by now, Captain, if it hadn't been sold like alarm clock. Now when he's about, he warns you, this is tick-tock, tick-tock, says Smee. Peter Pan, ahoy! Cried the lookout. Captain Hook forgot about the crocodile instantly. Blast! He cried, looking through his telescope. It is Pan! He orders his men to load the cannon and fire. Quick, Tink, shouted Peter as the cannonballs flew by. Take Wendy and the boys to the island. I'll stay here and cause a diversion. Oh, look, there's a big cannonball. It's coming up from the ship. Tinker Bell took off at once and flew straight to Peter's hideout, but she purposely flew too fast, leaving the others far behind. I don't think Tinker Bell liked them. I think she was a bit jealous. Tinker Bell, wait for us. We can't keep up with you, yelled Wendy and the boys. But Tink didn't want Wendy to wait. Peter Pan had hardly looked at Tinker Bell since Wendy had come along. Tink didn't like it one bit, and now she had a plan. Oh, look. She's in the huff. She's angry. Tinker Bell zoomed ahead, flying through an opening in the tree where the Lost Boys and Peter lived. She told the boys Peter had sent her with a message that there was a terrible Wendy bird headed their way. Peter's orders were to shoot it down. The Lost Boys hurried out from their hiding place. I see it, yelled Skunk as he and the others placed stones in the catapults. Ready, aim, fire, shouted the boys. There they are. That's the Lost Boys. And there's Wendy. Suddenly rocks were flying everywhere, hitting Wendy and sending her tumbling from the sky. Luckily, Peter arrived just in time to catch Wendy. Peter, you saved my life, said Wendy, throwing her arms around him. I bring you a mother to tell you stories, Peter angrily told the Lost Boys, and you shoot her down? But Tink said it was a bird, stammered Cubby. She said you wanted us to shoot it, added Rabbit. Tinker Bell, said Peter, you might have killed Wendy. I hereby banish you for a week. Taking Wendy by the hand, Peter flew off to show her Mermaid Lagoon. John and Michael wanted to explore Neverland too, but had no interest in mermaids. They wanted to see Indians. John, you be the leader, declared the Lost Boys. Then, lining up behind him, they all marched off into the forest. There they are, all marching off into the forest. All the boys. And there's John in the beginning, being the leader. As they marched along, the Lost Boys and John made a plan. They would be very clever and capture the Indians. It might have worked except for one thing. The Indians caught them first. Michael and John were very frightened until the Lost Boys explained how things work. When we win, we let them go. When they win, they let us go. But this time the Indian chief wouldn't set the Lost Boys free. He thought they had kidnapped his daughter, Tiger Lily. You tell me where you hid the Princess Tiger Lily, the chief said, or you'll be punished. Oh, the chief looks very angry. He lost his daughter. And there they are, all tied up. See? And his teddy bear tied up as well. Meanwhile, Peter was showing Wendy the beautiful Mermaid Lagoon. Wendy thought the mermaids were lovely. The mermaids couldn't say the same about Wendy. They thought she looked silly in her nightgown, and they didn't like that she was friends with Peter. There's the mermaids. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's Wendy on the rock in her nightgown. And there's Peter. While Wendy was fending off the jealous mermaids, Peter had spotted Hook and Smee rowing by in a small boat. Tied up in the back was Tiger Lily. There's Smee and Captain Hook, and there's Tiger Lily. Peter and Wendy flew off for Skull Rock to see what Hook and Smee were up to. From a cliff they peered down at Captain Hook and his prisoner. Captain Hook was threatening Tiger Lily. "If you don't tell me where Pan's hiding place is, I'll leave you here on the rock, for when the tide comes in..." Look, there she is, sitting on the rock in the water. But Tiger Lily just held her head up proudly and refused to give Peter away. "I'll show you, old codfish," said Peter. "Stay here, Wendy, and watch the fun." Peter shouted, "Captain Hook, you're a codfish." Hook and Smee looked up in amazement. Hook drew his sword and leapt up to attack Peter. He lunged at him, but Peter was too nimble. He drove the captain crazy, prancing and dancing around him and dodging every thrust of his sword. Then Peter pinned the captain, but Hook broke free and fought Peter to the very edge of a cliff. "I've got you this time, Pan," he cried. Peter backed away from Hook. Hook followed. "Ah!" he screamed as he tumbled off the cliff and into the lagoon. "I'll get you for this, Pan," he yelled. As he fell towards the water, Hook heard a familiar sound. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. "I say, Hook," said Peter Pan, "do you hear something?" The captain desperately kicked his feet away from the crocodile's sharp teeth, screaming, "Smee! Save me! Smee!" Peter was laughing his head off when Wendy reminded him about Tiger Lily. The brave Indian princess already had water right up to her chin. Peter swooped down to save Tiger Lily and flew her back home. There she is. The Indian chief was so happy to see his daughter again that he freed John, Michael and the lost boys. Then he placed a headdress of beautiful feathers on Peter Pan, proclaiming him to be his chief little flying eagle. "Wow!" yelled Peter. "Oh, how wonderful," said Wendy. "Bravo," added John. They've all got feathers in their heads as well. They're all been Indians as well. And this is Tiger Lily back home with her daddy. That's her daddy, the chief. Finn, away. Away. But there was someone who was not joining in all the celebrations. Poor Tinker Bell was sat all alone without Peter or her friends, and she wasn't happy at all. And that's just how Mr. Smee found Tinker Bell, all alone, sitting by herself. "Begging your pardon, Miss Bell," said Smee, catching Tinker Bell in his hat, "but Captain Hook would like to have a word with you if you don't mind." There he is, Captain Hook, talking to Tinker Bell. Aboard the pirate ship, Captain Hook was telling Tinker Bell his plan. "We sail in the morning," he told Tinker Bell. If she would only tell him where Peter's hideout was, he promised to take Wendy off to sea with him. "With her gone, Peter will soon forget this mad infatuation," sneered the captain. Sick with jealousy and loneliness, Tinker Bell fell for Hook's evil plan and showed him how to find Peter's hideaway. Hook smiled. Then he grabbed Tinker Bell and locked her in a glass lantern. At last he could get his revenge on Peter Pan once and for all. At Peter's hideaway, all was cosy and quiet. Wendy, acting as a good mother, was tucking the boys into bed. As she did, she sang to them about the wonders of a real mother. By the time Wendy had finished her song, John and Michael were so homesick that they wanted to leave for London immediately. Even the lost boys wanted to go, but not Peter. "Go back and grow up?" "No," he said stubbornly. "I'm warning you, once you're grown up, you can never come back." But no one was listening to Peter. They had only one thought in their minds: a mother to love them and hold them and sing to them and to sleep at night. One by one, Wendy and the boys left Peter's hideaway, only to walk right into a trap and the arms of the waiting pirates. There you are. Oh, look at the pirates. And they've got all the lost boys tied up. And there's poor Teddy, he's caught as well. And Wendy's just about to be caught too. Before returning to his ship with the prisoners, Hook lowered a beautifully wrapped package into Peter's hideout. Tying his prisoners to the mast of the ship, Hook warned them, "Join us or walk the plank." "Never," declared Wendy. "Peter Pan will save us." "My dear," said Hook, "we left a present for Peter, a sort of surprise. I can see our little friend at this very moment reading the tender note. To Peter with love from Wendy." They're going to pretend the present's from Wendy so that Peter will open it. But if he could see within the package, he would find a little device set so that when it's 6 o'clock, he will be blasted out of Neverland forever. Oh, he's put a bomb in the package. Oh dear. Are we missing a page? After hearing Hook's evil plan, Tinker Bell escaped and rushed to Peter Pan's hideout. Peter was just untying the bow of the package when Tinker Bell flew in. "Hi, Tink," said Peter, holding up the box. "Look what Wendy left." See, he thinks it was Wendy that left it instead of Captain Hook. Tinker Bell tried to pull the package away. "Stop that," yelled Peter. "What's the matter with you?" There's Tinker Bell trying to pull the package away, but she's very, very small, so it's hard. There was no time to explain. Tink flew at the box, pushing it as far from Peter as she could. The gift began to smoke and then kaboom! The explosion was so huge it rocked the pirate ship out at sea. Hook removed his hat and bowed. "And so passeth a worthy opponent." Thinking that Peter Pan was dead, Hook smiled and turned to the captive children. "Which will it be? Join my crew or walk the plank?" Oh dear. Wendy spoke up bravely. "Captain Hook, we will never ever join your crew." Hook gave Wendy his most gentlemanly bow. "Ladies first, my dear." With tears falling down her cheeks, Wendy walked the plank. See, she's walking along the plank, and when it comes to the end, she'll have to walk off and drop right into the sea. One step, then another, closer and closer to the edge, until finally she jumped. "Captain," said Smee, confused. "There was no splash." "The ship's bewitched," the men began to wail. But it wasn't a ghost who'd come to haunt Hook. It was Peter Pan, along with Tinker Bell. They had come to save Wendy. "This time you've gone too far, Hook," shouted Peter Pan as he flew up onto the rigging. Hook scrambled up after him, then drew his sword. "Take that," cried Hook as he lunged at Peter, forcing him off balance. "You wouldn't dare fight old Hook man-to-man," taunted the captain. "You'd fly away like a cowardly sparrow." "I'll fight you man-to-man with one hand tied behind my back," crowed Peter. Here they are all fighting. And there's the lost boys fighting the other people, the other sailors, see? As Wendy, John and Michael and the lost boys fought the pirate crew, Peter and Hook continued to battle until Hook disarmed him. Peter jumped up, grabbed a pirate flag and wrapped it around Hook. The fight was over. Peter had won. But when Peter turned his back, Hook freed himself and lunged with his sword. Peter jumped out of the way, causing Hook to lose his balance. Down he fell to face his worst fear. The crocodile was waiting and its mouth was wide open. Hook emerged between the crocodile's jaws, screaming for Smee to come and rescue him. "Yeah, come and rescue me." Smee and the other pirates had all taken refuge in a rowboat and were rowing away as fast as they could. Captain Hook leapt out of the crocodile's jaws and started swimming after his crew, with the crocodile close behind him. "Hooray for Captain Pan!" cried the children. All right, you swab, said Peter to his brand new crew. We're casting off. Let's set sail for London. Wendy smiled. Hoist the anchor, cried Peter. Tink, let's have some pixie dust. Here they all are, in the ship, going home to London. Wendy, said Mrs. Darling. She was gently shaking her daughter, whom she had found fast asleep by the window. Oh, Mother, we're back, announced Wendy as she woke. Back? Asked Mr. Darling. All except the lost boys, explained Wendy. They weren't quite ready to grow up. It was such an adventure. Tinker Bell and mermaids and Peter Pan, we sailed away in a ship in the sky. Mary, said Mr. Darling, not sharing Wendy's excitement at all, I'm going to bed. But as he turned to leave, Mr. Darling paused to look up into the night sky. There, crossing in front of the moon, was a ship made of clouds. That's Peter going back to Neverland. You know, said Mr. Darling, I have the strangest feeling I've seen that ship before, a long time ago when I was very young. And indeed he had. And there's John and Michael fast asleep in their beds. And that's the end of the story.